All right, I think we're live. Welcome, everyone, to our panel discussion on the importance of brand design. I'm Parinaz, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. Before we get started, I'd like to thank everyone at ADPList for all of their work putting the BeMore Festival together, especially over so many different time zones. That's not easy. So thank you for all of your hard work. I'd like to thank Ganesh for hosting this discussion, as well as our panel of incredible industry professionals for sharing their expertise with us today and contributing their gifts and talents to this wonderful community. Lastly, I'd like to thank all of you for participating in this discussion. I hope you enjoy and find some valuable tidbits during our time together. Moving into our agenda, if we want to switch the slide. Yeah, thank you. You'll be with us for the next 40 minutes. I'll take about 10 minutes to introduce everyone on stage. Then we'll move into the discussion with some prepared questions for our panel. That will be about 20 minutes. And I'll leave 10 minutes for Q&A. If you have a question, feel free to drop it into the chat, and our host, Ganesh, will bring it up on the screen, and we will distribute your questions with the panelists. So I'll move into some introductions. That's me up on the screen. I'll be your moderator. My name's Parinaz Kassemi. A little bit about myself. I am a UX designer at Lifetime. I am a writer for UX Planet. I'm co-director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion at Add2, vice president of public relations at Toastmasters, and I've been mentoring with ADPList for about 1 year. You can find some of my socials below, and I would encourage you to reach out if you would like and connect and ask some questions. And now I'm excited to announce our panelists. We have Andrew Chen, Arianna Orland, and Jon Howell. Moving into the next slide, Andrew is an associate creative director on the creative studio team at Instacart. He's been a designer for 15 years and has worked in a variety of industries from nonprofits and advertising to B2B and consumer tech. He's also had experience working on the entrepreneurial side as a freelancer and started his own studio, as well as working in-house for various brands. Andrew's been mentoring with ADPList for about a year, and you can find him on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter, all listed below. Moving into our next slide, Arianna is Director of Product Creative for Cross Meta Design System and has been in the industry for 20 plus years. Arianna is co-founder of Invisible Talks, a conference for creative professionals that celebrates the art of design. She's a partner at Invisible Ventures, an angel investing syndicate that works with design-centric startups. She also serves as the board president of Creativity Explored, a Bay Area nonprofit and studio-based collective that partners with people with developmental disabilities to celebrate and nurture the creative potential in all of us. Arianna holds a master's degree from NYU's Interactive Telecommunications program. She frequently writes on the subject of creativity, and her work has been featured in prestigious publications such as CoDesign, 99U, and Forbes. Arianna has also been mentoring with ADPList for about a year, and you can find her on LinkedIn and Twitter, listed below. And finally, Jon is a design director on the Dropbox brand studio team focused on in-product brand. Prior to Dropbox, he's had the opportunity to work on and lead both brand and product design teams at companies like Robinhood, Lyft, Twitch, and Microsoft. He's an advocate for creating brand systems and experiences that are rooted in a strong emotional connection. He also has his own design practice with his partner called Freelance Studio, where he has helped a variety of brands and products build trust, drive preference, and create affinity with their users. Jon has been mentoring with ADPList for around 2 years. You can find Jon on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, all listed below. Now I'm going to open the floor for the panelists with our first question. What do you do day to day in your own words, and what inspires you? What are some of the pros and cons of what you do? Would just love to hear a little bit more about you guys, and feel free to introduce yourselves. Arianna, do you want to lead us?
Maybe her connection's dropped off a bit. I can take it first. Day to day, as a ACD at Instacart, most of it is spent checking in with team members on various projects. At the creative studio at Instacart, We have an interesting kind of pod structure where different CDs and creative leads oversee different parts of the business. And so on any given time, we're working directly with a lot of our marketing partners on campaign work. We work with a lot of agencies as well. So I myself work with some of our production design agencies, as well as a branding agency that we work with on higher level B2B work, and different initiatives at Instacart, product branding, et cetera. So there's a lot of meetings in the mix, and a lot of work across cross-functional teams. That's usually where I spend the bulk of my time. Honestly, what inspires me to come to work most of the time is the people that I work with. For the most part, there's you can get through just about anything if you enjoy the folks I work with. So people keep me inspired. Learning people's stories, getting to know them, usually is what keeps me energized at work. So I'll wrap it up there.
Right. I can take the next one. So what I do in my day-to-day, I can't speak too much about my role at Dropbox just yet. I just started last week, so pretty new there. But I can speak a little bit about my experience at Robinhood. I worked on a team called Product Experiences, very similar to what I'm doing at Dropbox now, is kind of working at the intersection of both brand and product design, figuring out ways in which we can bring more of the brand into the product. And so our team kind of operated as a horizontal. So we would work with individual product teams. So it's a lot of relationship building with product managers, other designers on some of the vertical teams, also as well as engineers that work on these vertical teams, and essentially partnering with them for, sometimes it's a smaller stint or maybe it's a larger stint of a project. But a lot of the times we're bringing illustration, animation, and also like some sorts of haptic feedback. What are those interactive moments that make people really fall in love with the brand? And that could be subconsciously, it doesn't need to bang somebody over the head. But it's kind of those moments where, you kind of say, oh, that's a really nice experience. And then when you recall it, if you talk to somebody else, you share that experience with someone else based upon something you might have interacted with or done in apps. So that's kind of my day-to-day. Again, kind of like Andrew said, a lot of meetings, a lot of relationship building, and then also like obviously building and collaborating with other designers. And then what inspires you to come to work? I think what's super interesting about that space in between brand and product is that there is always a different challenge that comes up, whether it's a new product launch, working on like something that might be a little bit more challenging from a product design perspective. How do we work on a specific feature? How do we introduce this feature? How do we make people aware of these things that this specific feature might do? And then there's also like large product launches, like wait lists, or really heavy brand moments. So it's kind of like varying in terms of the work, which is really exciting, and that's kind of what inspires me to come to work every day. So I will pass it off now.
I'm having a little trouble with my Wi-Fi, so if I cut in and out, forgive me, but I'm going to go for it on this answer. So what my day-to-day looks like is really about creating the conditions for design and creativity to thrive and helping folks become better at their practice. So, a lot of design leadership is about the work to get to the work. It's about shaping the work. It's about holding space. So like other folks have echoed, a lot of meetings, a lot of conversations, but I do love the moments when we can actually talk about design and think about the ways that the products and services that we work on can come to life and really connect on an emotional level for folks. And what keeps me inspired is I love this job. I wanted this job. I've wanted this job for 20 years and I still want it every day. And I'm incredibly inspired by all of the work that we create as a collective community. I'm excited by all the new voices that continue to join our profession every day. I'm inspired by communities like ADPList, and I get a lot of energy from appreciating each other as practitioners.
Amazing. I love all of those answers. That was awesome. Love to hear about what inspires all three of you. And I feel like, isn't that one of the biggest perks of working from home is like, we're going to have connection issues, but there's so many, so many good things that come with it too. So thanks, Arianna, and thanks everybody for your patience. Are there any ways that your approach to personal branding has changed over the years? Does anyone want to spearhead that one?
I can jump in on that one. I think early on in my career, I really wanted my personal branding to maybe telegraph a little bit more experience than I actually had. And so, I also didn't understand that the difference between an archive and a portfolio. And had a really good lesson early on from a creative director that I respected. So it took me a minute to kind of figure out that your personal brand is really about what you want to telegraph to the world, and it's a beacon.
Oh man, I was really excited to hear.
Uh-oh.
See if it comes back.
Oh, shoot. We lost her. Oh,
Wait,
back.
she's back.
The more experience I get, the more I just really want to double down on an authentic representation of who I am and what I believe that I can bring to teams and to brands and to businesses.
I love that, Arianna. I feel like I can definitely relate as a self-taught designer, especially early on in my career, pursuing work, trying to land gigs or get noticed by agencies. There was definitely this sense for my personal brand that I was trying to showcase like capabilities. I feel like more than anything else, and the biggest focus at the time was just getting more work. And I feel like over time, I've come to this kind of recognition that your personal brand or your voice, like Arianna was saying, is like, what are you bringing to the table, and what's that kind of unique perspective that you have based on your experiences, based on your background, based on what you've kind of gone through in life. And so for me, I kind of brought that to a head when I realized what gets me excited about working every day is this kind of internal inkling that I'm passionate about helping other people succeed. And that really is what kind of I boil down everything I do, whether that's with freelance work and entrepreneurial efforts with clients. It's helping them succeed in what they're pursuing or in what they're doing. And I bring that value to my work as a creative director as well, whether that's for my direct reports and, like Arianna was saying, kind of creating that space for good work to happen, as well as upwards with cross-functional stakeholders and executives, and how are we succeeding together as a business. And that's also what influenced me over time to get involved in ADPList and do mentoring and things like this, because to me, paying it forward, creating space for people to grow, and giving it an opportunity for others to succeed is critical to how I perceive like my voice and my brand, far beyond just a great body of work. So I would say if anything's evolved over time, it's been that, just the direction of what it means like for me and my voice there.
So I will follow that up with a kind of a different perspective, which I agree with everything that's been said. I think definitely I share the same sentiment Arianna had. Beginning of my career, I think I really indexed heavily on like, I have to make my website great, and I need to have like all these like beautiful like visuals to like create a beautiful portfolio. And really, as time went on, I started to realize that like the work is a thing that people come to your portfolio site, or maybe this is too specific into a portfolio site, but I think as time went on, I kind of pulled back on that and I let the work show. I think as you start to grow and as you're starting out in your career, there is probably that thought that like you need to have some sort of personal brand or something that contributes to the work that you want to do. But as time has gone on, I've really started to realize that the less of my personal branding shines through. And I think the one thing I've been trying to figure out over the years, and I'm continually doing that, is like, how do I curate my work to find the work that I want to do moving forward. And so like I've used this example before mentoring with people, is like, if you want to go be a product designer, or you want to go be a brand designer, or you want to work in a specific industry, and maybe this is getting too far into portfolio, but I think it is about like personal branding, is showing the work that you want to do typically gets you the jobs that you want to work in, or the industries that you want to work in. And so like I've kind of pulled back from showing any personal branding, or over indexing too heavily on that, and just showing the work that I want to do in the future, or I aspire to do. And also like the discipline, I really focus on like, I want to sit at the intersection of brand and product design, and that's part of my personal brand. And less so like saying like, hey, I'm a product designer, I'm a brand designer. So yeah, different perspective on like how everybody else answered that question, but hopefully that's helpful.
I see it as a similar perspective. I think it's about like putting out in the world like a signal of the kind of work that you want to attract.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone for all of those answers. I really feel like, as a creative person, some of the struggles that I've had with brand design, and I'm, earlier in my career, but finding some sort of a consistency between all of these, creative people. Like I do photography and like, illustrations and all of that stuff. So how can I, encompass all of that into one person and like one brand? That's been one of my biggest challenges. So thank you all for the insight on, your personal experiences. That was really great. Moving into our next question, as designers, we know that our most important factor to success is how our audience likes and interacts with the products and experiences we design. It's also so important to ensure that we are telling that story to our stakeholders in an effective way. Tell me a little bit more about what you do to understand your audience, as well as understanding the business needs to deliver the best possible product and experience. A little bit more technical. Anybody want to move into that one? Start us off.
I can start this one off. It's fairly brief, but I think obviously, and it might be a little bit expected, but the more you get to understand your users and their pain points, the things that they struggle with, and also understanding the things that they enjoy or love, what makes them tick. I think a lot of the things that I've done in the past and the teams that I've worked on is, how do we create really memorable brand experiences in product where people think, like I take the example of like pairing the Apple Watch, like the particles that fly around and you scan the code and then your Apple Watch is paired. That's something people talk about. And so where are those things, as you understand your users, whether it's you're working on a rideshare app or you're working on XYZ, what are those things that make people's lives a little bit easier? And it's like, oh man, that just, it happens and you just really enjoy that experience. And those are the things that people talk about. So the more you understand your users, obviously, and the things that they might get frustrated, the things that they love is super important. And then also, obviously, like as you understand that, knowing what the business goals are is the foreseeable future, whether it's the 6, 12, 18 months, and even in 2 years beyond that, right? With these business goals, how does the work that you're doing ladder up to that? How can you have an impact on what the business is doing? I think that's something that early on in my career, and I've heard before from other more junior designers, is that like you want to create something beautiful, or you might be more of a visual designer, but you have to understand like whatever you're building or creating, whether it's on the product or the brand side, is like there needs to be an impact on the business. You can't just go out and create things that are beautiful. It's helpful, right? But it has to ladder up to something else. So understanding what the business is trying to achieve, or there's like Q1, these are our goals for Q1 or Q2, making sure that whatever you're doing is laddering up to that.
I would just add to what Jon was saying. In my role, working at scale is quite complicated. And so in addition to understanding our users, our audience, the business goals, and all of those suggestions for approach, one of the things I like to do is just go on a listening tour. I like to meet with folks internally because we sit at the intersection of product and brand as well. And that's a really interesting space to work in that I hope we get a little bit of a chance to discuss. But there's a lot of educating on both sides to kind of bring that creative potential together. And so I also find it really effective to just sit with folks and ask them what their challenges are, what their motivations are, what kind of handoffs they would need to actually operationalize the work or activate the work. Because I think, again, in kind of sitting across that space, there's many different methodologies and approaches and lots of redundant nomenclature that doesn't actually mean the same thing. So lots of talking. Leadership is lots of talking.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think asking good questions is such an important part of the job. And I feel like at the intersection of product and brand in particular, and just like in product design, it's so important to really listen and also observe. I think it is really key because there's so many times when the behavior doesn't actually match what people say. And then there's times when research and insights can only take you so far. But if you kind of get into the realm of story and trying to understand what people are experiencing in the day-to-day, also dog fooding and getting a chance to be the customer yourself. I think I'm fortunate to work for an organization where I can use the app on a regular basis. I think all are actually. In those different spaces, and then even friends and family, you can observe some of that behavior from what's going on there, and to try and embrace the actual application of quote unquote doing the work or being involved in it, to kind of own that space. Because I feel like if you think about it, we are all in this space of storytelling. And when you think about other art forms like cooking or filmmaking or whatever it might be, it's so important to get into the headspace of the work you're doing. An actor goes and immerses himself into the world of the role he's creating. A chef, when they're crafting a new menu, is going to be eating at restaurants and trying to understand what the guest is experiencing. And in so many ways, we as creatives, as designers, should take on that same ethos when we're looking at our work and getting into that headspace, not doing it from an external factor, but really becoming that audience that we're trying to serve.
Awesome. That was a really great point, Andrew. I love the, just taking the example of being an actor and being a chef and really fully immersing yourself into those positions, those roles, because you're right. That really is, a huge part, if not the part of what we do. So really, really great example. I love that. So getting into a little bit of competitor analysis, I suppose, tell me about some companies that you feel are doing really well in brand right now and what makes them stand out to you.
Who wants to go first?
Well, my wife. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I don't care either.
No, please go.
Yeah, sure. So I think some that come to mind: Sweetgreen, Figma, obviously, PayPal, Cash App, and I would say those are the four that come to mind. I think there's obviously there's a lot of talk around Figma right now, but I think there is something really interesting that you can create such an affinity for a software company that people are buying their socks and buying swag. It's people really love the product that much that they're going to go out and buy a sweatshirt. That we could talk forever on other things that they're doing from brand visuals, but I think that gets too into the weeds. But I think they're doing great. PayPal just recently redesigned their web experience. I think they're kind of revitalizing their kind of brand in a really interesting way. They've hired a bunch of new great designers on that team. And yeah, I think and obviously Cash App sitting within Square. It's a very interesting space because they kind of sit, from what I understand, they kind of sit on their own within Block. I could be getting that wrong too. But they've kind of built their own brand that sits within a larger org, which is really interesting, from illustration to kind of their giveaways across social, just doing a lot of interesting stuff across different channels. And yeah, those are the top 3 or 4 that kind of come to mind.
Yeah, all of that. +1 on the Cash App. I actually had that on my list as well. There's something I love about the way Cash App has kind of embraced the challenger space. Even though they're, it's Square and it's Block or whatever, Like they've really taken on that persona, I guess, of the challenger brand, and like really tapped into culture to be kind of like the anti-Venmo, I guess, in that space, and like have taken up kind of the territory that Venmo as kind of like the everyman kind of universal brand. Cash App has taken like a stronger point of view on certain things and thinking about like some of the content. Like I think they've done really well with like the branded content pieces and having a little bit more of like a voice and point of view even on their visuals. So that's really fun. I'm sure this is probably expected, but like I'm a huge fan of what Liquid Death has been doing. Like, I mean, I think I feel like it's a given, but it's actually like really hard to pull off if you think about it, right? Because like with a tagline like "Murder Your Thirst," like it'd be really easy to get gimmicky and campy and alienate customers, but they've like taken, I think, a really strong approach with good insights, strong briefs, putting out amazing content, understanding who they're targeting, and kind of owning that persona and building a space for it. Like I think that's really interesting. And while I feel like there's probably an expiration date to the type of work that's kind of coming out of that, like the subverting tropes and the parody stuff that's happening, I feel like they're executing on it at a really high level. It's like resonating with customers and other creatives alike. So that's a big one for me, Liquid Death.
Yeah. Speaking of subversion, the first one that comes to mind to me is
always happens at the best times. It's like a cliffhanger.
Let's wait a second.
Oh, sorry, you guys. Okay, I'm going to go really fast. Tim Bolonix, speaking of subversion, brand designer at Pinterest, whose brand design portfolio is almost entirely audio. And you can call a phone number, I think it's 1-888-CALL-TIM, 1-888-CALL-TIM. Absolutely amazing. Patagonia, from an ethics perspective, they literally just gave a beautiful living their mission and values kind of way.
Sorry, guys. Let's just give it another second. I feel like she's been coming back quickly, so.
Maybe we should just come back to it.
All right. Let's just wrap up maybe with some like final thoughts. We only have a few minutes left, and I want to make sure, it looks like we have a lot of really awesome questions. So I want to make sure Arianna, you're back. You want to finish your thought?
I don't know where I dropped off. Tim Bolonix, individual portfolio, Patagonia, living their mission, and we transfer from a content marketing perspective, taking something really boring and turning it into like an absolutely cool artistic moment of expression.
Thanks, everyone. Those are awesome. I like literally have been taking notes and just like writing down some of them to go check them out. Definitely, obviously heard of a lot of them, but like Liquid Death, I have not heard of. So I'll have to look into that. But again, we only have a few minutes left, and I want to make sure we have some time for questions. So I just want to open it up. If anybody has like, if you have any final thoughts or anything that you want to share, other than that, we can move into the Q&A. Does anyone have anything they'd like to say?
I think we're good.
Nope. Awesome. Okay, well then let's move into our question and answer. Ganesh, our host, I think is gonna pull up. Okay, awesome. So Daniela Pacheco Alonso, sorry if I'm not saying that right. She's a UX UI designer at Moment Studio. Do you have any resources for how to start creating a brand design?
I can take a stab at this. I don't know if there's a specific one. I know you're not asking for a specific one. There's a lot of articles out there. There's a lot of people that do TikToks and stuff that explain that. I don't know if that's the right way to go. I wouldn't suggest that. You can kind of get like an idea. someone say something? No. But I think there is, there's a lot of resources out there where you can read. There's quite a few great articles on Medium that talk about the process of building brands. I don't think there's a formula or an exact way, because I think every identity project that I've taken on, it's kind of gone through a different, kind of not a different process, but similar structure. But I think it's kind of different depending on the client and how large the client is and the steps you have to go through for the most part. But I don't know if I have a specific resource. I know that doesn't really answer your question, but there's a lot of articles and things that you can read out there, but I wouldn't say there's a specific one. That's just kind of my key takeaway.
Yeah, I think to kind of tack on to that, like, I think it's easy, and especially with the kind of wide scope of designers, I believe, that are part of the ADPList community. I think there's one thing I'd love to kind of address on that line is, like, identity design is so much more than having a logo, right? Or colors and typography. There's a lot that comes out of building a brand. And so much of that happens behind the scenes, and I think is really knit to objectives and understanding your audience. And while that is an important part of the process, building a logo, designing something, building a template, the to Jon's point, like, I do get like a little bit of heartburn around like the formulaic process of, like, I've seen those TikToks or like those Instagram carousels of like, here's the 3 steps of like creating a, great brand design, and like go to Dribbble and like download something and, rip it off, whatever. So while there's always going to be that commoditization of design, I think it's always important to come back to first principles and consider, like, get a clear brief, understand what you're dealing with when it comes to building up a brand. If you're, designers out there, if you're working with a friend and helping them, get their coffee shop rolling, before you start getting into figuring out what the logo is going to look like and what font you're going to use for the menu, start asking yourself, what's the purpose for the coffee shop being there in the first place? Start with the why. Start asking those questions. Who are they targeting? Who's their audience? What are they dealing with? What's the locale that you're in? What is your unique selling proposition or competitive advantage compared to someone else's, to another coffee shop out there? Start asking those fundamental questions and start getting a picture together for what you're dealing with before you start getting into the nitty-gritty of design.
Great answers, everybody. Let's take another question. Ganesh, are you with us? All right. I'm going to take this one from Matthew, a graphic designer. Okay, awesome. And that's the one. How do you make sure a brand stands on its own outside of the visual identity? That's a good one.
I would love to hear Arianna's thoughts on this as well, because Arianna have worked on some projects together in the past. But something that's interesting about this, I feel like, has to do with your presence in whatever space you're dealing with. And I think it varies from industry to industry, but part of it is being top of mind in the audience that you're dealing with, right? So much of that is knit to, if marketing is kind of what you're putting out there, brand is kind of what people are, that's the lens through which they're perceiving what you do. So brand isn't who you say you are, right? It's what your audience says you are. And the only way to continue to do that and to get kind of that ongoing feedback loop is to put out content and, whatever that might be, but whether that is on social media, whether that is through different campaign work, whether that is through thought leadership, like, you have to have a presence in the space that you're dealing with. And I think that's something that people tend to forget about, especially when you're in like an early startup phase or you're dealing with, less resources. Being top of mind, incredibly important, and getting creative with how you show up, I think, is really important there.
Arianna, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would just echo what's already been shared. Your brand is not only how you look, it's the actions that you take. It's how you fulfill a promise to your audience. It's about being consistent. It's about so many more facets than just a visual identity. And I think that's what's so interesting about this discussion is being able to talk about the idea of branding from a lot of different levels, and hopefully demystify for folks that it's all about the visuals.
Thank you both for those answers. Let's go ahead and take another question from the audience. All right, from Mario, a UX designer at Upwork, UX UI designer at Upwork. What is a good book on relationship building or team development that any of y'all would recommend? Good books. I love that question.
I can jump in first. One of my favorite books, especially if you're on an in-house team, is a book called Rise by Patty Azzarello. It's a really great one that both encompasses what it looks like to work on a team, as well as how to kind of grow in your career, especially as you transition from like an IC to a manager or different levels of visibility at a company. Rise, I would definitely check that out.
One that comes to mind is by a guy named Darren Coleman. It's called Building Brand Experiences. And it's like a practical guide to retaining brand relevance. And it obviously goes through like the process of things that you can do to achieve this, but it also talks about like the interpersonal relationships that you can build and foster with your cross-functional partners. Arianna touched on this earlier, which I think I kind of left out in one of my answers, but I think it's super important to build relationships with those cross-functional partners, especially if you sit at the intersection of brand and product design, because like those two teams need to figure out how to collaborate. Because a lot of times teams are separated, brand and product kind of work in their own kind of sections, and so the more you can bring those people together, understand when and where to bring them into the process, and start to kind of introduce each other and bring them to crits or provide feedback. There's a lot of things that people can learn in different disciplines. So that book does a really good job of kind of explaining that. So.
Arianna, do you have a book to share?
Yeah, just I would say The Making of a Manager by Julie Zhu. I think it really helps tackle any folks out there that might have imposter syndrome. It's in kind of scaled companies, and it's just.
I think we lost her. These are great recommendations. I loved all of them. I would also add, I don't know if this is like super specific to the topic, but Harvard Business Review has a really great series of just professional books that cover a lot of different topics. I'm sure they have something on like interpersonal relationships, and I'm a big fan of that series. So that would be my recommendation. I think we can maybe fit in one more question. Ganesh, what do you think? Awesome. So Aditya, so sorry if I'm not saying that right, a solution product manager at Hewlett Packard. What to include or consider when creating web accessibility design, where targeted user group include visual impaired, color blindness people? Does anyone have a good answer for that one?
I think it's an ongoing challenge. Like, I think I love this because I think it's top of mind for all three of us here on this panel for the stuff that we deal with on a regular basis when it comes to product and brand design, especially for digital, like not just digital surfaces, but broadly speaking, beyond just like web accessibility, there's accessibility concerns just like across the board, whether it's like neurodiversity or like color blindness or different things like that. Like, I think it's something that's like important to think about. And this goes back to what we've said previously around getting into the headspace of our customers and thinking inclusively around what we're doing is really important. I think at the bare minimum, implementing those processes to the work that we do is just incredibly important.
Awesome. Well, we are getting some messages that we're going to have to wrap up. So, yeah, and it looks like we just have a minute left. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to the panelists. Those were incredible, amazing questions. Thank you to our host, Ganesh, and thank you for all of you for all of these great questions. I hope you got some good questions answered and found this discussion to be valuable. You three are amazing. So thank you you guys helped me so much and with all of your insight and expertise. And thank you to BeMore Festival. I hope you enjoy the rest of the festival that is going on, I think, the rest of the day. So thank you. That's all I have.
Excellent job, Parinaz.
Thank you.